Chapter 32 is on plant nutrition and transport. So there's some plants that can be used to clean up poison, and they actually will metabolize metals, heavy metals, even lead. This fern can absorb arsenic, and there's some that absorb different things. Sunflowers is another one that will absorb metals out of the soil. So here you see the sunflowers, and these are being used to clean up radioactive metals from a contaminated pond. I think this one might have been near Chernobyl, maybe. And the advantage here is that instead of digging up dirt and hauling it off to be, stored, you can use the plants to absorb it, and then you just have to haul the plants off to a dump or a hazardous waste area. You don't have to haul off all of the dirt. Okay, plants obviously acquire their nutrients from soil and from the air. So as a plant grows, its roots absorb water and minerals and some O2 from the soil, and its leaves absorb the CO2 from the air. So plants make sugar from photosynthesis. You guys remember that, I am sure. And they use that. That's your primary metabolism. And then the secondary metabolism, you can use those sugars to make the organic materials they need, including things like cellulose for the trunks of trees and lignin and all kinds of other materials. The plasma membranes controls the roots, controls solute uptake, and if you remember from chapter 31, this is the epidermal cells. This is an extension off them, and what it does is it increases the surface area so that there's more contact with water and minerals and whatever it needs. So water solutes can move through the epidermis, or it can do something called an intracellular. It can move between the cells. It can do one or the other. And so if you look here at the diagram, you have two routes for the water. You have the first route, which is through the cells. You can see it going through the plasmodesmata here, through the cell, all the way in. And then you have the extracellular, outside of the cell route, and that'll go through the outside of the cells in the extracellular fluid here. And it'll do that until it reaches this barrier. This Casparian strip here is a barrier. And what that does is it forces it then to go through this last cell. And doing that really allows the plants to control the water, what's going through the cell. By having this Casparian strip, this final line of control here, you don't get free-flowing water through the outside of the cell. You have a level of control through that cell. Okay. So all water and solutes must pass through the selectively permeable plasma membrane of cells of the epidermis to enter the xylem for transport upward. And that's where I showed you in that previous slide that they don't just flow in through the extracellular area. You hit a Casparian strip, this protective barrier, and that forces it to go through a plasma membrane, and that's where we get the control from. Okay. How does water get up a tree? So we have transpiration at the point of the leaves, right? Think back to 6th grade science, I think. Transpiration up here. And what that does is it literally kind of pulls the water up the tree trunk. And that is through the properties of water. If you remember cohesion, adhesion, those properties of water allow it to stick to itself and pull it up. If you were to just take a pump and try to suck water up, you'd only go about 33 feet or so before you couldn't go any higher if there was an air bubble. The reason a tree can do it is there's a continuous line of water, and so the one water molecule sticks to the neighboring water molecule and sticks all the way down. And you can see that off on the side here in this purple diagram over here. You have the cell wall, so the water, the adhesion sticks to something else. That is adhesion. And then cohesion is the water sticking to itself as it is pulled up the tree trunk, and then at the point of the leaves, then transpiration, and it goes out into the atmosphere. Guard cells help control transpiration. Guard cells are on either side of the stomata of a plant, and they help open and close the stomata. So if there's potassium in the guard cells, they're going to help open it with the water, and then they can close it. So they can have it open at night, or open during the day, and closed at night. It's a way of regulating transpiration. Okay, so here is your diagram of guard cells, and what you have, here's your potassium molecule. So the potassium will go into the guard cell, and then by osmosis, the water flows in. When there is lots of water, it opens the stoma here, right? And then if the potassium goes out, the water follows it, and that closes the stoma opening. Now this is good. So one, the plant can actually regulate this. It actually has like an internal clock that'll do this night to day. But also if the plant gets dehydrated, if it loses water, right? If the water comes out, that also will close it, helping reduce water loss there. Okay. Phloem is what transports the carbohydrates. It's going to take the food, essentially, the carbohydrates, and that flows down. It takes the sugars from that are made in the leaves, and it's going to take them down the plant. And you can see this in here. All right, here we go. Here's a sieve plate right here, and this is the sieve tube member here. So you have openings here, like a sieve, and the phloem can transport through that. All right, the phloem transports food molecules made by photosynthesis. And the way it works is you have sugar here, and this is a place of high sugar. So this is actually active transport to get the sugar to come out here. The rest of it is just going to work by diffusion. You have less sugar here, so we're going to have it diffuse this way. And these work in pairs. So here's your xylem. The water's going to flow up. It's going to mix with the sugar that's being made, and that's going to flow down to what's called a sugar sink, which can be your tubers, your roots, wherever you need the sugar, that's your sugar sink. All right, at the sugar source, sugar is loaded into the phloem tube. The sugar raises the solute concentration in that tube up at the top. This was the previous slide. And water will flow, raising the pressure in the tube. The increase in pressure at the sugar source and the decrease at the sugar sink causes the flow. So that causes the phloem sap to flow from the source of the sugar to the sink. Aphids have allowed scientists to study how the phloem sap flows, and what they do. It's kind of ingenious. Here's the aphid feeding on it. The little stylet stuck in here. They anesthetize the aphid, cut the aphid from that piece, and here you see it stuck inside here. Here's the little stylet stuck in. The aphid's been removed. And what they did was they did this all over a plant, and they found that the stylet dripped faster if it was near the source of the sugar. And what that shows is that's where the sugar, that pressure thing, that's where the sugar's being pumped out. And so it shows higher pressure up by the source of the sugar. Plant health depends on the complete diet of essential inorganic nutrients. Plants must obtain usable sources of the chemical element it requires, and we call those nutrients, from the surroundings. So the ones it require is a nutrient. If it doesn't require it, it doesn't need it. But obviously plants don't move around. They move through the environment, so they get their nutrients in their environment. And if they don't, obviously they're not going to be healthy plants. Okay? So if any nutrient isn't available to them, you're not going to end up with optimal growth. So if you have a limiting nutrient, you're going to have limited growth. In this case, in this diagram, they've limited the potassium. Okay. Macronutrients are things like carbon and nitrogen, and you need large amounts. So macro, think big, nutrients, large amounts of them. These are going to be the main building blocks of organic molecules, the big stuff. Micronutrients, you need small amounts of them, and many of them are cofactors for the enzymes that the plants have. So theoretically, you could diagnose some nutrient deficiencies in your own plants, although I stink at this. You look at my garden, but you in theory can. So what they have here is a picture of a healthy plant, and they have a picture of a plant that has a nitrogen deficiency, and they have a picture of a phosphorus deficiency, and they have a picture of a potassium deficiency. And I guess if you know what you're doing, you can look at the plants and figure that out. Fertile soil supports plant growth, and fertile soil contains a mixture of small rocks and clay particles that hold water ions and also O2 to diffuse into plant roots. Okay, and soils can consist of different layers or horizons. And the topsoil is hugely important when you look at plants. Contains something called humus. It's decaying organic material. So it's both dead stuff and like fecal matter. It's everything that's organic from living things that have died. But all that contains nutrients that we need, because all those living things had carbon and all the stuff that makes up life, so as opposed to rocks. Okay. All right, the plant root hairs are closely associated with the soil. So again, you can see the diagram that these are at, the level of a single cell. All right, cations are positively charged ions, and they adhere to soil particles. They stick to it. When we look at cation exchange, the root hairs release the hydrogen ion, and that displaces the cation from the soil, allowing the roots to absorb them. So you saw that they needed potassium in those guard cells. Well, this is a way that they get the potassium out of the soil. Anions are negatively charged ions, and they are readily available to plants because they are not bound to soil particles. So the hairs can just literally just pick them up easily. Okay, soil conservation is essential to human life. Talking about that good topsoil, that erodes very easily, and the rocks underneath are not good necessarily for plant growth. Things that help with soil management are water conserving irrigation. If flooding and letting the soil drain off obviously is not a good idea when you look at erosion control. And then prudent use of herbicides and fertilizers. Organic farmers are bound by certain things they do, and they have to follow certain ecological principles. And to be able to label the food as organic, they have to be certified that they follow those principles. Agricultural research is working to improve the yields and the nutrition of crops. So not just the amount that you get, but in that amount, that amount is more nutritious. Right? And you can do that through the traditional plant breeding and crossing, and you can also do that through the DNA technology. There are rice crops available where they've added vitamin A to it, because that's something that can be deficient, especially in third world countries. So if you can stick that into a plant, it's an easy way to get it available to a population. Okay, so a fungus can help plants absorb nutrients from the soil, and these will be around the root hairs. So they form a symbiotic relationship with the plant. So here you can see the picture of that symbiotic relationship. You have what's called a mycorrhiza. It is a symbiotic relationship. So you have the fungus on the outside and the root hair on the inside, and the benefit for the fungus here is it gets the carbohydrates from the plant. It gets the sugars, essentially. The benefit for the plant is that this fungus will help it absorb not only water, but it'll help it also absorb phosphates and other minerals. So it's beneficial to both the fungus and to the plant. That network of fungal threads that you just saw increases the plant's absorption of nutrients and water, and that's the benefit to the plant. And the benefit to the fungus is that it receives the sugar from the plant, or the carbohydrates from the plant. Okay, most plants, so that was what we just saw before, was a fungus symbiotic relationship. Most plants also need bacteria, and the reason is even though the atmosphere is mostly nitrogen, it isn't available. It is bound in a way that is not available to the plant. So it takes that atmospheric nitrogen and it fixes it into ammonium, which then can be, here's your bacteria. So here we go. We have, here's your atmospheric nitrogen. You have these ammonifying bacteria to fix it into ammonium. Then you have the nitrifying bacteria that fix it into a nitrate, and that makes the nitrogen available for the plant. Now, I don't know if you've heard of this crop rotation with legumes, but legumes are really, really good at housing these bacteria. So what they do is they take the bacteria that will fix the nitrogen, and they house it in these little nodules here in their roots. And so by doing that, again, it's a symbiotic relationship. In this case, these bacteria thrive on the sugar provided to them by the plant. And in return, they fix the nitrogen, and they also fix enough nitrogen that when you pull out the beans or whatever it is you planted, they leave nitrogen in the soil behind. So it actually is beneficial for the following year's crop. You also get other kind of cool things in the plant kingdom that are parasitic and or carnivorous. You have mistletoe, you have the classic Venus flytrap. So plants we tend to think of them as just sitting there, but the mistletoe is actually a parasite.